President Trump meets world leaders at the ASEAN Summit this week. Key discussions with Xi Jinping and Anthony Albanese could reshape trade, defence and critical minerals cooperation. For more, let's head to Sydney. We're joined by Professor Tim Harcourt from UTS. Good to see you. What's the main focus for President Trump's visit to ASEAN this year? Just to try and rack up those frequent flyers? He's been busy.
He has. He's the only man who's almost 80 who can get off a plane and dance the way he does. I think Boris Yeltsin was the last world leader I saw dance at
well, speaking of, here it is. Here it is. Let's have a look.
Here we are.
I mean, he's just gotten off a flight, which is probably a 24-hour flight. It's a long trip.
Yeah, it's one way to get rid of the jet lag. Look, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because the trip to Malaysia is partly trade and reassurance and partly a bit of congratulations actually from the other states, particularly what he's been doing in Southeast Asia in terms of peace. And I noticed Anwar Ibrahim was pretty effusive in his praise of Trump's peacemaking. So, you know, ironically, they've been anxious about the tariffs. He's reassured them that there'll be plenty of investment and likewise plenty of purchasing.
Well, he would have loved the Malaysian flag. Did you see him holding onto the Malaysian flag? It looks so similar to the US flag. You would have loved that there as well. Obviously, there's been this agreement between Cambodia and Thailand. Talk to us about what's been going on there.
Well, there's been border skirmishes for some time, and the Thai-Cambodia border for 50 years has always been a flashpoint. And it seems like Trump has sort of got them together. He's certainly getting a lot of credit for it, as he did in a similar arrangement in Africa. So at the moment, his peace credentials are pretty good, and I think that's been recognised by ASEAN, which of course was set up as, in a way, a peace pact to get those nations that used to have a lot of conflict on the same page in terms of security, at least.
Yeah, I tell you what, the Venezuelan opposition leader's got a bit of work ahead of her to try and keep up and to earn that Nobel Peace Prize that Trump didn't get, given what we have seen. Obviously, we've got this talk between President Xi and President Trump. They're both approaching this meeting as divorced lovers with as much on the other party as they can to try and stack up their case to carve up the world between them. How do you see this meeting going, given what's been happening over recent weeks?
Well, there's news that there has been something of an agreement. I gather it's about rare earths and critical minerals, but also TikTok and some of the AI and some of the social media channels. So it's quite comprehensive and quite, I guess, wide-ranging. It's not the good old days, Aaron, where we just took tariffs off goods. These international pacts, cover a whole lot of different areas that cross borders. So that could be pretty significant, particularly if he meets Xi at the end of the summit at the end of the week.
What does China want out of the United States?
Well, I think China is in a competitive tussle for, supremacy in the global economy in everything from currency to our institutions, let alone geopolitics. So I guess it's containment, and I would imagine that after, for instance, the US's success in the Middle East and the strikes on Iran, I think there's probably a view now that the United States still has a lot of firepower in a military sense. So whatever they do in an economic sense, you've got to have that at the back of your mind. And tariffs are no longer about economics; they're a geopolitical tool. And I think all the nations dealing with the United States, including China, would be acutely aware of that.
And talk to us about how much Asia, wider Asia, we talk about Cambodia and Thailand and Malaysia, and obviously then there's Australia and the Asia-Pacific as well. We're so reliant on China and the United States getting along, right? Because we're all stuck selling products to both, hoping that everyone gets along. How important is it for the region for a better relationship between China and the United States?
Well, it's certainly helpful because, ASEAN was set up for stability, and key parts of ASEAN like Singapore have their own relationship with China and indeed the United States that are very different when it looks at economics and looks at security, and Australia too, where we've got strong security ties with the United States. It's very important to us the South China Sea and indeed in the Pacific a little bit closer to home. But economically we have that strong relationship with China, so we're probably finding ourselves in the same boat as a lot of the ASEAN nations in that regard.
All right, let's talk about Anthony Albanese now as well. So the Trump meeting with Anthony Albanese obviously went off pretty well. Could have become another one of those we see things differently embarrassing ones. Only Kevin Rudd was caught up in that. But Anthony Albanese heading to ASEAN, what does he need out of Asia Pacific?
Well, I think Anthony Albanese is going to go over to Malaysia with a bit of spring in his step. I mean, he had a pretty good week with President Trump in Washington. He's proven to be quite adept on the international stage as Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. He's done a lot of work on ASEAN. He had that summit in Melbourne, and of course we had the Tika Airport Economist Special. And he's also done a lot of very good spade work in the Pacific, and I think that was well regarded in Washington. And also he's managed to traverse the erratic world of President Trump psychologically with some success that hasn't happened for a lot of other nations who have had to having to dig themselves out of a bit of a hole. So he's actually handled it pretty well and still seems to manage to do quite well, particularly in the Asia Pacific where Australia's economic interests lie.
And so what does it look like for Australia here then? What does the developments around critical mineral supply agreements actually mean for Australia?
Well, I think ultimately Australia once again is in a position where we have what most of the world needs for energy and food security. And even as we move to a world of more renewable energy in the mix, again, Australia has the critical minerals, as does many of the nations of Latin America, for instance. So we are in a good position bargaining wise, but of course, we have to be a good citizen in the Asia Pacific, given our very strong ties, and balance our security and our economic interests adeptly. But I actually think Anthony Albanese so far has played those cards pretty well.
Which is pretty remarkable, obviously, because leading up to the meeting with President Trump, there were a lot of concerns and criticism that he couldn't secure a meeting, that Australia was falling down the right. I mean, we didn't even have an American ambassador to Australia.
Yeah, there was a bit of fear of that. I mean, I think the only misstep was, recognising the Palestinian state with Hamas in place, and that was a mistake also made by Keir Starmer and Mark Carney and President Macron in France. So he wasn't alone. But apart from that, you'd have to say that the capitals of ASEAN and Japan and Korea and the United States would be pretty happy with with the relationship they've got with Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and the Australian government.
Talk to us about how this AUKUS, I guess, the cooperation and the defence priorities, what have we learned over the past week? Should we be feeling like AUKUS will now happen, or are there still serious concerns, as we've heard from former PM Malcolm Turnbull?
I think after last week we can feel a lot more confident in the outcomes, but also in the fact that we do have good security ties. And I still think the result of the Middle East and the taking out of Iran's nuclear arsenal has really changed the dynamic, and you can see now people are taking Trump very seriously in ASEAN, this week and elsewhere in Europe, and they did in the UK. So I think we know that America's got the superior military power, and that will be the case for a long time. It's a matter of shoring up our own defence and security, whilst ensuring harmonious economic relationships with the rest of the world to the extent that we can.
Yes, will be interesting to see how long it takes to get one of those subs, though. We'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate it.